Stop scrolling, stop right there. I'm going to tell you the most important thing modern science is hiding in plain sight. The laws of physics, the very rules governing reality, might actually provide the definitive proof of consciousness continuing after death. Forget everything you think you know about the brain being a biological computer that just shuts off. We are diving into the deepest, weirdest corners of reality, the quantum realm, where the standard rules of life and death simply don't apply. What if the undeniable fact that energy cannot be created or destroyed means that the energy that defines you, your awareness, your memory, your self-identity, is also non-destructible? This isn't philosophy. This is the radical idea of quantum consciousness. For decades, mainstream science dismissed the idea of a non-material energy signature that defines the soul, but a growing body of fringe theories, championed by respected physicists, is demanding a re-evaluation. They are seeking a scientific basis for soul by looking at the brain not just as hardware, but as an antenna perfectly tuned to receive and interpret information that exists outside of space-time. Imagine your brain is a complex television set. When the TV breaks, the show doesn't stop broadcasting, right? The signal, the consciousness, still exists. But how does quantum mechanics, the science of the infinitesimally small, even begin to prove the spiritual world? Well, it all hinges on the mind-bending concept of superposition and the profound role the observer plays in collapsing reality itself. If the observer is required to create reality, what happens when the observer leaves the physical body? The answers are absolutely terrifying and exhilarating. Have you ever heard of the Orch OR theory, or the concept of Orchestrated Objective Reduction? This is where the science gets truly mind-blowing, suggesting that consciousness resides in tiny structures within your neurons called microtubules, and when the body fails, that quantum information is released back into the cosmos. If this idea, pushed forward by guys like Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, turns out to be true, it means that the universe isn't just a cold, chaotic place. It is fundamentally built to hold and sustain your consciousness. Before we jump into the hard data and the historical experiments that hint at this reality, tell me, what is your deepest, most honest theory about what happens when we die? Comment your thoughts below. I read every single one. Stop scrolling. Look up. Everything you see, the screen, your hand, the entire universe, might not fully exist until your mind decides to look at it. That isn't philosophy. That is the bizarre, mind-bending reality of quantum physics, and it might just provide the first real scientific proof that consciousness, what many call the spirit or soul, is an actual physical entity, independent of your body. For decades, science has grappled with the hard problem of consciousness. How does simple biological sludge firing neurons produce the richness of inner experience? We thought the brain was a complex computer, but what if it's actually a quantum antenna? To understand this, we have to dive into the most famous and most confusing experiment in history, the Double-Slit Experiment. Imagine you're a pitcher throwing baseballs at a wall with two openings. The balls that go through land in predictable spots. Simple. Now, shrink those baseballs down to the smallest particles in the universe, electrons, photons. When we fire them at the double slit, they don't act like tiny baseballs. They act like waves, spreading out and creating an interference pattern, as if they traveled through both slits simultaneously. It's like the particle is existing everywhere at once, a cloud of pure possibility. This is called the superposition state. But here is the absolute plot twist that shatters reality. The moment we place a detector, the moment we observe the particles, that wave function instantly collapses. The particle stops being a cloud of possibility and snaps into a single, definite location, behaving like a tiny baseball again. The simple act of observation changes reality. So if mere observation forces the universe to choose a reality, what exactly is the observer? This is where the fringe theories connecting quantum mechanics to the spirit world begin. If consciousness is the necessary ingredient to collapse a quantum wave, then consciousness itself must be fundamental to the universe, not just a byproduct of chemical reactions in the brain. Now let's bring this concept from the distant universe right into your skull. In the 1990s, the physicists Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed the incredibly controversial theory known as Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or Orch OR. They looked at the brain not as a typical computer running binary code, but as a vast complex quantum processing unit. They focused on tiny structures inside our neurons called microtubules. Think of microtubules as the scaffolding of the cell, but Penrose and Hameroff suggest they are much more than that. They propose that these structures are perfectly designed to sustain quantum coherence, meaning the particles inside them can enter that strange superposition state, existing everywhere at once. This quantum state, shielded within the microtubules, is where consciousness truly resides. It's not the neurons firing, it's the quantum computation happening inside the neurons. And here is the part that changes everything we know about life and death. If consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, it follows the laws of quantum information. And the first rule of quantum information is that it cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed or dispersed. According to the Orch OR theory, when the biological body dies, the microtubules lose their ability to sustain the quantum coherence. The quantum information, that unique pattern that makes you, doesn't just vanish. It is released from the failing biological structure, back into the fundamental fabric of the universe, what they call the cosmic quantum information field. This is essentially a scientific framework for the existence of a soul, a non-local, non-material consciousness that precedes and survives the physical body. It's not magic, it's physics. If this idea, which is still highly speculative and debated fiercely in mainstream science, holds true, then the very space around you is saturated with disembodied quantum information. This isn't just about survival after death. It implies that consciousness is woven into the reality we perceive. If you're finding this theory mind-blowing, hit the like button right now and subscribe, because we are just scratching the surface of how physics explains the impossible. But there's one detail that completely changes the game regarding how this consciousness might communicate with us. If consciousness is simply quantum information, it doesn't need physical senses to perceive reality. It perceives the universe through probability fields. This could explain spontaneous creativity, intuition, or those moments when you just know something without any logical reason. Your brain, acting as a quantum receiver, might be momentarily tuning into that universal information field. Imagine the universe as the world's largest hard drive, constantly storing and sharing data, and your brain is just one terminal accessing that information through quantum entanglement, a spooky connection where two particles influence each other instantly, regardless of distance. The biggest hurdle for the Orch OR theory is proving that the complex, warm, wet environment of the human brain can actually maintain quantum coherence long enough for it to matter. Classical physics suggests that thermal energy should instantly destroy these delicate quantum states. However, recent studies, particularly involving the quantum efficiency of photosynthesis in plants and the navigation of birds, are showing that nature is far better at harnessing quantum effects in biological systems than we ever imagined. Life itself might be a master of quantum mechanics. So the next time you hear someone dismiss the idea of a spirit or soul as pure fantasy, remember the double-slit experiment. Remember the strange reality that your observation creates. Because if the universe requires consciousness to define its reality, then perhaps consciousness is the ultimate indestructible reality, existing far beyond the limits of your biological form. Stop scrolling. Look up. If I told you that the very act of looking at something changes reality, and that your consciousness might be the most powerful, non-physical force in the universe, would you believe me? Science, specifically quantum physics, is staring directly into the void and seeing something that looks suspiciously like the spirit world. Forget everything you think you know about how the brain works. We're not talking about simple electrical signals jumping between neurons. We're going down to the deepest level of reality, where matter stops behaving logically. This is the realm of the infamous double-slit experiment. Prepare yourself, because this is where the mind-bending begins. Imagine we are shooting tiny particles like electrons at a screen through two narrow slits. Logically, they should act like tiny bullets, creating two distinct lines on the screen behind, and they do, unless we aren't looking. When scientists run this experiment without trying to measure or observe the electrons, something impossible happens. The particles stop acting like bullets and start acting like waves. They pass through both slits simultaneously and create an interference pattern like ripples in a pond. They exist everywhere at once. This is called superposition. But here is the absolute plot twist. The moment we introduce a detector, the moment we try to observe which slit the electron goes through, the wave function instantly collapses. The electron stops being a ghost everywhere at once and snaps back into being a single, definite particle. Think about that for a second. The very act of observation, the mere presence of awareness, forces reality to choose a specific state. Now, the million-dollar question that has haunted physicists for a century: what exactly constitutes an observer? Does it have to be a camera? Does it have to be a human mind? Or is it something non-physical? Is it consciousness itself? This brings us to the most radical and highly controversial theory linking physics to the soul: Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or Orch OR, proposed by the legendary physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. These guys didn't just stop at the electron level. They dove deep into the structures inside our brain cells, specifically these tiny scaffolding proteins called microtubules. They hypothesized that these microtubules are not just structural supports, they are the processing centers for quantum computation. If you're already blown away by the idea that your consciousness is a quantum computer, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because the next step is what connects this to the afterlife. According to the Orch OR theory, our consciousness is not merely an emergent property of complex wiring. It is quantum information stored within these microtubules. This information is non-local and non-material. Now follow the logic. If the brain experiences clinical death, if the heart stops and the blood flow ceases, the quantum information stored in the microtubules is not destroyed. It simply leaves the body. It's like turning off the computer, but the data is uploaded to the cloud. Penrose and Hameroff suggest that this departing information is what we perceive as the soul or spirit. This information doesn't just vanish, it dissipates into the fabric of the universe, specifically into what physicists call the quantum vacuum, or the zero-point field. And here is the genuinely mind-blowing part that nobody talks about. When a person is revived, when the quantum conditions in the brain are restored, that quantum information is theorized to return to the microtubules. Hameroff calls these experiences near-death experiences, which are defined not by hallucinations, but by the temporary release and subsequent retrieval of quantum consciousness. It's an incredible concept. Death isn't the end of consciousness, but merely a phase transition where our quantum soul temporarily returns to the universal quantum field. But wait, there's a bonus detail that puts a massive question mark over all of reality. If consciousness is truly quantum, then it is tied to the concept of non-locality. This means that two quantum particles can be instantaneously linked, regardless of the distance separating them, even if they are on opposite sides of the universe. If we apply this principle to consciousness, it implies that your mind is not strictly confined to the skull. Think about phenomena like genuine intuition, collective consciousness, or even the feeling of being watched. If our quantum consciousness is non-local, then perhaps we are all partially entangled, subtly linked to every other conscious being on the planet. Your feeling of connection to someone far away might not be poetic license. It might be a literal quantum entanglement in the universal consciousness field. While the Orch OR theory is far from accepted, it faces immense skepticism from mainstream neuroscience. It offers a powerful, testable framework for explaining non-material energy. It gives the concept of a spirit a physics equation. So the next time you look at the stars, or even just look at your own hand, remember this: the very act of that observation is fundamentally shaping reality. Your mind is not just a passive receiver of information, it is an active participant in the quantum construction of the universe. And maybe, just maybe, when we talk about the soul, we are actually talking about the most complex, non-physical, quantum data packet ever devised. Stop scrolling, look up. Look at your own hand. You think you know what reality is, right? Solid, predictable, governed by the laws of Newton. But what if I told you that the deepest, weirdest science we have, quantum physics, might be the key to proving that your consciousness doesn't die when your body does? Forget ghosts and haunted houses for a second. We are talking about the fabric of existence itself, and how certain Nobel Prize-winning scientists believe the human brain is a biological antenna for the soul. Stick with me, because this is where the universe gets truly bizarre. The problem with reality. For 300 years, classical physics taught us that the world is like a set of perfectly predictable billiard balls. If you know the starting velocity, you know where everything is going. Simple. Then came the quantum world, the realm of the super tiny where atoms and electrons live, and here everything breaks. The most famous example is the double-slit experiment. If you shoot tiny particles at a screen with two slits, they act like waves, creating an interference pattern. But here's the kicker. The moment you try to observe which slit the particle goes through, it stops acting like a wave and instantly snaps back into acting like a single, predictable particle. It's known as the observer effect. Reality, at its most fundamental level, isn't fixed until consciousness looks at it. Hold that thought. If the smallest components of the universe are fundamentally uncertain until observed, then the question becomes, what is the observer? The brain is not your consciousness. For decades, mainstream neuroscience has treated the brain like a complex computer. Consciousness, emotions, memories, they are just the software running on the hardware. When the hardware breaks, the software is gone forever. But a brilliant, controversial theory called Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or Orch OR, flips this script completely. Orch OR was developed by Sir Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Stuart, Hameroff, an anesthesiologist. They argue that consciousness is not merely generated by the connections between neurons, but rather it is a non-local quantum phenomenon that the brain receives. Think of your brain not as the computer, but as a sophisticated modem or a television set. If you smash a TV, the program doesn't stop existing. It just stops being displayed on that specific screen. The signal, the information, is still out there, carried by the broadcast waves. Penrose and Hameroff pinpointed the structure responsible for this quantum signal. Tiny protein structures inside your neurons, called microtubules. They hypothesized that these microtubules are not just structural supports, they are quantum processors. They maintain a fragile, complex quantum state that links the brain directly to the deepest levels of the universe, the very fabric of space-time, the quantum release mechanism. Now let's get to the truly mind-blowing part, the scientific mechanism for the soul. If consciousness is quantum information stored in the microtubules, what happens during clinical death? According to Orch OR, when the heart stops and the oxygen supply is cut off, the microtubules lose their ability to maintain the quantum state. The information, your individual consciousness, is not destroyed. It cannot be. Instead, it is released from the biological structure and dissipated back into the quantum field of the universe. It's like the TV signal has lost its receiver, and the broadcast continues non-locally. This released quantum information, this non-material energy, is what they theorize could constitute the soul or spirit. And there is a fascinating, compelling connection here to the most profound human experience, near-death experiences. If you're finding this deep dive into reality shocking, smash that like button and subscribe. We decode the universe every week, and you don't want to miss what we uncover next. Comment below right now. Do you think consciousness is local or non-local? The plot twist, the science of coming back. But what nobody tells you about the Orch OR theory is the mechanism for coming back. When a person who has had a clinical death is successfully resuscitated, when the heart starts again and blood flows back to the brain, the quantum information, the consciousness, can be pulled back into the microtubules. Hameroff suggests that the highly structured, hyper-real experiences reported during NDEs, the feelings of peace, the tunnels of light, the encounters with beings, are brief glimpses of the underlying quantum reality before the information snaps back into the biological receiver. Studies on NDEs often report memories that are more vivid and structured than normal waking memories, sometimes containing information the person could not have possibly known while their body was clinically offline. If consciousness were merely a product of chemical reactions in the brain, the moment those reactions stop, the experience should be chaotic, fragmented, or non-existent. Instead, we see highly organized, non-local experiences. This isn't definitive proof, but it is one of the most rigorous scientific attempts to bridge the gap between the measurable world of physics and the eternal mystery of consciousness. It suggests that perhaps the spirit world isn't some mystical, foggy realm, but the very real mathematical quantum underpinning of everything. The next time you look at the stars, remember this. The information that makes you you might not be stuck inside your skull. It might be woven into the fabric of space-time, waiting for its antenna to turn back on. And that, my friends, is a reality more incredible than any fiction. Stop scrolling. Forget everything you thought you knew about your mind. For centuries, science has treated consciousness like a side effect, a fancy electrical impulse generated by wetware, destined to flicker out the moment the brain dies. But what if the deepest, strangest laws of the universe, the rules of quantum physics, are telling us something completely different? What if the same science that explains how your phone battery works also proves that your consciousness might be eternal? This isn't metaphysics. This is a journey into the fringes of neuroscience and physics, where the line between matter and mind dissolves. The hard problem and the quantum leap. Classical physics, the world of gravity, gears, and billiard balls, cannot explain why you feel like you. It can map every neuron firing, every chemical released, but it can't explain subjective experience, the redness of red, the taste of coffee. Scientists call this the hard problem of consciousness. But the quantum world, that's where things get spooky. Imagine your brain not as a standard computer, but as the ultimate quantum machine. In the quantum realm, particles can exist in multiple states at once, a concept called superposition. Think of Schrödinger's cat. It's both alive and dead until you open the box. That moment of observation collapses the probabilities into a single reality. Now apply that uncertainty to the brain. If consciousness is purely classical, everything is deterministic. But if consciousness relies on quantum mechanics, then the brain must be leveraging superposition. This brings us to one of the most controversial, mind-bending theories ever proposed: Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or Orch OR. Developed by physicists Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, Orch OR posits that our consciousness is not generated by the synapses between neurons, but deep within the neurons themselves, inside tiny structures called microtubules. These microtubules are like the scaffolding of the cell, but Penrose suggests they are actually protective quantum conduits. They are the perfect environment for particles to enter superposition and maintain it, meaning your thoughts, your memories, your subjective identity are being processed not as simple electrical signals, but as complex quantum wave functions entangled with the very structure of space-time. Think of it like this. If the entire brain is an orchestra, the microtubules are the individual instruments playing a complex, non-local symphony, the entanglement loop. Here's where the spirit world theory emerges. Quantum physics tells us that information cannot be destroyed. It must be conserved. If your consciousness is fundamentally quantum information stored within these microtubules, what happens when the body undergoes clinical death? When the blood stops flowing, the microtubules lose their ability to sustain the delicate quantum state. The orchestration stops. According to Penrose and Hameroff, this isn't the end. Instead of the quantum information vanishing, it is merely released. The quantum information, your essence, your soul, your unique consciousness profile, detaches from the biological hardware and dissipates into the universe, or more specifically, into the fundamental geometry of space-time. It becomes non-local. If your mind is already blown by the idea that your brain is a quantum computer, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because we are just scratching the surface of what this means for life after death. Comment below. Do you think science will ever fully explain the soul? The cosmic network, non-locality. This released information, this quantum ghost, remains coherent. It hasn't disappeared, it's just no longer tethered to a specific location. This concept of non-locality is the quantum plot twist. Two entangled particles can be billions of miles apart, and measuring the state of one instantly tells you the state of the other, faster than the speed of light. If consciousness is quantum, it means that at the deepest level we are all non-locally connected. This fringe theory offers a stunning explanation for phenomena like near-death experiences. When patients are clinically dead, no measurable brain activity, many report vivid, organized, hyper-lucid experiences outside of their bodies. Classical science struggles to explain this. How can the mind be more functional when the brain is shut down? But if consciousness is merely shifting from the biological processor to the non-local quantum field, then clinical death is not a blackout. It is the moment of liberation, where consciousness temporarily expands beyond the constraints of the skull and perceives reality from a universal non-local perspective. The theory suggests that upon death, this quantum information persists indefinitely outside the body, potentially existing in a state of eternal superposition until, perhaps, it is ready to anchor itself in a new biological system. So the next time you look up at the stars or ponder the mystery of your own existence, remember this. The same rules governing the smallest particles in the universe might be the proof that your mind, your unique sense of self, is not just a temporary spark. It may be a fundamental, indestructible piece of the cosmic information network. If these radical theories are even partially correct, then science is not debunking the concept of the spirit. It is simply giving it a new, terrifyingly complex name: coherent quantum information. It doesn't prove heaven or hell, but it does suggest that when the lights go out, the show is far from over. If you were surprised by the quantum mechanics behind consciousness, make sure you subscribe to join our journey through the deepest mysteries of science and history. And tell me in the comments, is the soul just quantum data? We'll see you next time when we look at the facts that change everything.